The Traveler's Toll. There is a unique loneliness to the in-between places. The bus terminal, the airport lounge, the back seat of a taxi. They are voids of transit, where we are neither here nor there, surrounded by souls as anonymous as our own. We keep to ourselves. We stare out the window. We wait for the journey to end. But sometimes, things get left behind in these spaces. A forgotten coat, a misplaced book, or something else entirely, something waiting patiently for a hand to close around it, for a curious mind to make a simple, innocent mistake. It's a mistake anyone could make, but when the consequence arrives, vast and unending, you will be left to wonder, in the ruins of your quiet life, why me? The drone of the Greyhound was a hypnotic, grinding lullaby, a constant, low-frequency hum that vibrated up from the floor, through the worn upholstery of the seat, and into the base of Marcus's skull. Outside the grimy window, the dark pines of the interstate blurred into an endless, rushing wall of black. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, cheap disinfectant, and the quiet, sleeping breath of strangers. Each rhythmic thump of the tires on the asphalt was a tick of the clock, counting down the 10 hours to a family reunion he'd rather miss. He was just another ghost in the machine, another weary traveler trying to fold his 6-foot frame into a space built for 5. He shifted, trying to find a position that didn't make his leg cramp, and his fingers brushed against something hard and smooth, wedged deep in the gap between his seat and the vibrating wall. He worked it free. It was a whistle, carved from a dark, dense wood that felt strangely warm against his cold skin. It was old, worn smooth by countless hands. The craftsmanship was exquisite, unsettling. It was shaped like a small, elongated human face, its eyes closed, its mouth a perfect O, as if caught in a moment of profound, unending grief. Boredom is a dangerous impulse. With nothing but the dark road ahead and the droning engine for company, Marcus lifted the strange little object to his lips. He pursed them and blew. No sound came out, not a note, not a shrill whistle, not even the whisper of his own breath passing through it. There was just a sudden, absolute deadening of all sound, a pocket of vacuum in the humming bus, the engine drone, the tire thump, the man snoring 2 rows back. It all vanished for a single, heart-stopping second, replaced by a hollow, ringing nothingness in his ears. Then, just as quickly, the sound of the world rushed back in, leaving him with a prickling chill that crawled up his spine and a faint metallic taste on his tongue. He lowered the whistle, a knot of unease tightening in his gut. He slipped it into his jacket pocket. An hour later, the bus hissed to a stop in a desolate, brightly lit rest area. A few passengers shuffled off into the night. One got on. She was a woman, gaunt and pale, wearing a coat far too thin for the night's chill. Her hair was lank and dark, plastered to her skull. She moved down the aisle with an unnerving silence, her feet making no sound on the rubber flooring. As she passed Marcus's row, she paused. Her head tilted, and a soft, wet sniffing sound punctuated the air. Her face, when she slowly turned it towards him, was a mask of placid sorrow, her eyes a milky cataract white. She didn't seem to truly see him, but to sense him. After a moment that stretched for an eternity, she continued on, sinking into a seat a few rows ahead, her back ramrod straight. Marcus tried to settle back into his doze, but a new sound had joined the symphony of the bus, a soft weeping. It was faint at first, a high, thin sound, easily mistaken for the whine of the air conditioning. But it was persistent. It seemed to come not from any single passenger, but from the air itself, a thread of grief woven into the fabric of the night. He glanced at the pale woman. She was perfectly still. Yet the sound grew, a keening lament that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. He clutched the wooden whistle in his pocket. It was cold now, cold as a river stone. He stared out the window again, trying to lose himself in the motion of the trees. He saw his own reflection, a tired face floating in the darkness. And behind him, reflected in the glass, he saw the pale woman. She was still sitting bolt upright, but her face was no longer placid. Her mouth was stretched wide in a cavernous, silent scream, her milky eyes boring into his. He whipped his head around. She was exactly as she had been, facing forward, still and quiet. The only sound was the weeping, which now seemed to be coming from directly behind his own head. He had to get rid of it. He stumbled towards the back of the bus, to the cramped, foul-smelling chemical toilet. The weeping was louder in here, the tiny, vibrating metal room amplifying it into a chorus of misery. He pulled the whistle from his pocket. His plan was to drop it into the blue water void of the toilet, to flush it away. But his fingers wouldn't obey. They were locked in a claw-like grip around the carved wood. He tried to force them open with his other hand, a strangled grunt escaping his lips, but they wouldn't budge. Panic flared in his chest. He was trapped in the shaking, stinking closet with this impossible, wailing grief, and he couldn't even drop the damn thing that had started it all. He stumbled back to his seat, defeated, the weeping now a constant, miserable companion. The bus pulled into another lonely outpost of light, a 24-hour diner and gas station. 10 minutes, the driver's voice crackled over the intercom. The few remaining passengers began to stir. This was his chance. As the driver stepped out onto the asphalt to smoke a cigarette, Marcus rushed to him, his voice a choked whisper. "That woman," he said, his hand shaking as he pointed back into the bus, the one in the gray coat. "There's something wrong with her. You have to do something." The driver, a heavy-set man with tired, bloodshot eyes, took a long drag from his cigarette. The red glow illuminated his weary face. He squinted, peering through the bus doors. "What woman, kid?" he asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. "There's nobody on there but you." Marcus stared. The bus was empty. Every seat was vacant. The pale woman was gone. The weeping, however, was not. It was louder than ever, a sharp, piercing sound of absolute despair. And it was coming from his own seat. He looked down at his hand. The wooden whistle was no longer in his pocket. It was fused to the flesh of his palm, the weeping face now his own, its carved wooden tears seemingly wet. It wasn't a summons. It was a transfer. He looked up, his own reflection staring back at him from the diner's dark window. His eyes were milky white. A single hot tear he couldn't feel rolled down his cheek. "Look," the driver grunted, turning away. "I don't care what you're on. Just handle it before we get back on the road." Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. He slowly, deliberately, walked back onto the bus, the hiss of the door sealing him inside. He sat down in his assigned seat, and as the engine rumbled back to life, he began to weep. It was a soft, unending sound. A grief that wasn't his but was his to carry, for this journey and all the ones to come. There are some tolls you pay without ever knowing the price. A moment of idle curiosity, a single breath in the wrong direction, and you can find yourself shouldering a stranger's burden. A burden they were all too happy to leave behind, waiting in the dark, in the quiet, in-between places of the world. Waiting for the next traveler to come along. Waiting for you.